What is up, boyos? Today we are joined by the great and wonderful Trevor Poelman of the Believe It or Not podcast and YouTube channel. Definitely go check out his videos. I found him a few years ago online. I thought he was an amazing content creator. He talks a lot about religion and stuff like that. And I thought, what a fascinating guy. I would love to have a conversation with him about, what led him to the kind of content that he makes today. In this conversation, we really get to the bottom of that. And it was a fascinating conversation, and I'm excited for everyone to hear it. So without further ado, Trevor Poelman of the Believe It or Not podcast channel / YouTube channel. For people who don't know who you are, because I'm a lazy interviewer, can you tell the people who you are and what you do and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so I am a YouTuber and a podcaster. I have Believe It or Not on YouTube, which I do video essays about leaving religion, deconstruction, and other type of things around that area. And then we also do a podcast with my buddy Damien, and we talk about religious history or things that religions teach, or just interesting things about religion. And that's kind of what I do.
Nice. Yeah, I stumbled across your videos probably around 2020. I want to say a couple years ago, and I was fascinated by it, right? Just hearing your story and stuff. And for people who are listening that have never watched this show is basically just a deep dive into content creators that I really enjoy. I find creators online and I ask them to come and bring their cats to come talk with us. But I stumbled across your content in like 2020, and I found it very fascinating. Just, your story is very interesting as far as like you came from a religious background, so much so that you even became like a pastor, right? Like a youth pastor. And then now you make videos about deconstructing from religion. So I kind of want to break that down. Like what was it that got you into religion in the first place?
I was just raised in that world. That's like what I knew. I went to Sunday school as a kid, vacation Bible school, summer camps, church every Sunday night, every Wednesday night. And then in high school, it was again summer camp and youth group and all that stuff. It was just like, it was my life. It was everything I knew. And then I went to Bible college, and so it continued to be everything I knew. And it was just, it was my life.
What was that like experience like? Well, I guess like to get deeper into it, like were your family members, I'm assuming, were super religious or maybe regularly religious? I don't know.
They were like very, very religious.
Very, very religious.
Yeah. So my whole extended family really. And and a lot of them still are. Most of them still are. So.
Oh, wow. What is that like? Like, because your videos, I wouldn't say are like mean to religious people at all, but like, I mean, you get pretty heavy into some of those topics about deconstruction and why these things you believe are wrong. What is that like having family members that are still, I'm assuming they know what you do?
Kind of, yeah. Some of them don't really understand it because they don't really understand YouTube or podcasts. So I'm in the clear with them. And then other ones, it's like, I have some family that will watch a video or once in a while and be like, I don't agree with everything, but I like, the heart behind it or whatever. And then other family, it's like, yep, I get you. And then there's other ones that maybe we don't talk anymore. So,
well, that's good though, that you at least have still some relationship with some of them. Despite it all.
Sometimes like I went camping with my family last week with like a number of cousins and siblings and stuff, and it was just such a great trip. And even though we don't have the same views on things, everybody was very respectful, and it was pretty cool. So
Yeah, I've found in my personal life there was a long stretch of time, I don't know if you can relate, where like I kind of almost pretended like I still cared just to like stay in good graces, and I almost feel like my relationships became better with my family members after I was just like, yeah, it's just not my thing, you know. Maybe not better, but like more, I don't know, we understood each other better, I guess.
Yeah, more respect almost. Like,
yeah,
because I find we just have topics we don't discuss. And I think most people in my family are pretty good at that. And if you do bring something up, it's like short and sweet and you move on. Like, we had a potluck dinner when we were camping, and my one cousin was like, okay, well, we're going to say grace. If you want to join in, that's fine. If not, we're going to do it. So we're going to do it over here. So it was like just a nice little like acknowledgement that not everybody believes the same thing anymore, but here's a quick grace because it's family tradition and it's what we do. And it's like, that's fine. That's perfectly cool. So, and I'm not going to be preaching down their throats, and they're not going to be preaching down my throat. So, yeah.
What like denomination did you grow up?
So I grew up, till I was 6, I was my family was in the Christian Reformed Church, or Dutch family. And a lot of my extended family are still in the Christian Reformed Church. And then when my dad decided to leave, we went to a church called the Standard Church, which doesn't exist anymore, but only existed in upstate New York, Ontario, and Quebec. So it's a very small denomination out of the holiness movement. That's a thing that happened in the late 1800s. And then when I went off to college, I went to a few different denominations, and then I ended up working at a Lutheran church. So kind of a mixed bag. I also went to a Pentecostal youth group for a little while when I was a teen, just because I was interested in like miracles and speaking in tongues and all that stuff and wanted to look more into that. So, I had that phase and saw some faith healers, things like that as well. So
wow,
all over the gamut. Yeah.
Wow, that's wild. That's such a stretch from like where you are now. That's wild. So like, what was that process like to go from like speaking in tongues to where you are now? Like, I guess what I'm asking is like, when you were doing, I don't know if you spoke in tongues, but obviously you were, okay. You were around people that did it at least. Did you know, like, what was that like? Did you like know you were like, I guess I don't know how to frame the question respectfully, but like,
I didn't know I was lying. It was a matter of it's peer pressure, it's groupthink, it's these people are doing it, I'm just going to let it flow. So you think you're letting the Holy Spirit move through you, but really you're just talking gibberish and believing it's the Holy Spirit moving through you. So and you're on such a high when it's happening too, and your adrenaline is just going wild that you think you're having this spiritual moment.
Yeah, and I've been to a couple churches like that, and they're, it's also like, I've never done it myself, but I've been around it and like stood in the corner like, whoa. Like it's also like, I imagine all the people around you are like, yeah, this is great. I'm sure that's part of it too. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wild.
And when they're praying for you to get like baptized in the Holy Spirit, it's like a group of people around you, and they're not going to leave you until you start speaking in tongues. So the pressure's on. And so like either do it and start. Sometimes they'll even say, just talk gibberish and the Holy Spirit will take over. It's crazy. But and then that was kind of the first thing to go, was my belief in that sort of thing, because I realized that what my brain was doing and stuff like that. So I kind of stopped believing in that pretty much by college. By like maybe second year of college, it was completely, I don't believe in speaking in tongues and miracles and things like that. So
how long were you like doing that? Just a couple years, like in high school?
High school thing. Like we had a couple people that first visited our youth group and talked about it, and then you get interested in it. My dad was interested in it, so Like he was on board and let's visit some weird churches on the outskirts of town. And
Yeah, that's funny, man. Like I had a similar experience. There was a time me and my dad were like looking for a church. We called it the Chuck E. Cheese church because it looked like a Chuck E. Cheese's inside, and
yeah,
and yeah, they all started like speaking in tongues, and they even like locked the door in the back, and we were kind of like, this is because they needed like their tithings or whatever, and we're like, we got to get out of here.
yeah.
So I pretended to have an asthma attack. I was like 6 years old, and we got out of there. But yeah, I've definitely had some experiences like that where it's like, whoa, this is wild. But I've also had experiences with like friends and stuff, and it seems like maybe you had a similar experience where like you get caught up in it in high school where like you're part of this youth group, and then
Yeah.
that kind of leads you to continue to pursue it. Is that why you became a youth pastor? Like when you were in youth group, it like really spoke to you and you like just gelled with it? Or I guess what I'm asking is like, what was it that inspired you to become a youth pastor in the first place, I guess?
Yeah. Like youth group was the only place I felt comfortable just like letting my weird flag fly. I was a weird kid.
Totally.
People found me funny there. People liked me there. So it was like, that's a place I felt comfortable. Whereas high school and things like that, I hated. And I also went to this like Christian summer camp, and they would have volunteers from like a Bible college come in, and they would do all the music, and they would be camp counselors and stuff. And at the end of the week, they did this like altar call for people who felt called to be youth pastors. And I was 14, and I was like, yeah, that sounds like something I could do. And that was my goal all through high school. After that was I'm gonna finish high school and go to Bible college and be a youth pastor. So, and then from then on, even as a high school student, I was volunteering with the junior high youth group, and then all through college, I was volunteering or internshipping with different churches. So yeah, it was just like kind of part of my identity was I'm the youth pastor guy. So,
Wow. And was that like the goal? You wanted to be youth pastor, or was there like a point where you're like, eventually I'd like to be the guy, like the pastor, or was that you just wanted to be the youth pastor guy?
yeah, it was just like the goal was to be a youth pastor. My thoughts was to like eventually get a master's in something to do with youth ministry and kind of because there's youth organizations as well. So I thought about maybe getting involved with those or going to a bigger church. It was like the career goal was always to do something with teens and stuff until I started working with them full time. And I realized that I'm really bad at it and I have anxiety and I don't want to be around kids all the time because they induce my anxiety. So,
Was it the kids, or was it like speaking to a group of people?
oh, I love that. Like they would let me preach on Sunday mornings and stuff. And that was great.
Oh,
But
okay.
like running around with hyper kids, it wasn't for me. I got too impatient too quickly and got too angry too quickly.
Yeah, I had a similar thing where I was like part of this youth program. I was more of the music guy in that, where I played instruments in the music or in the church and stuff, and I was part of the youth band and stuff, and like was helping the youth worship leader and stuff, and I was like, this is it. And then I hit my 20s, and I'm like, I don't know if I can be around teenagers all the time. It becomes a lot real quick.
Because it's fine when you're like in your early 20s or like your late teens and there's like similarity and interest and stuff. But then because I was 26 and I'm just sitting there like, I don't want this. Like, I don't want this to be my life. I don't want to be friends with 15-year-olds. Thanks.
So at what point was it, like during schooling, or was it really when you after schooling that you're like, I don't know if this is for me? Or
Yeah, it was after, but I feel like I was starting to walk away during school. Like it was like a chip away. It was slowly chipping away at my my faith, and like just I stopped believing in hell, and I stopped believing that gay people are sinners and things like that. And so I was more progressive by that time. I was a youth pastor, like officially, and then And then realizing I didn't like the actual job and I hated church politics and stuff, that got me out of it. And then I could reflect on my own without being in that world all the time, which for 26, 27 years, I had been in that world. That's where I lived, was in evangelicalism. So to take that step back and really evaluate for myself made some big changes. So.
Wow. That's, yeah. I think we had a similar thing, because when you became a youth pastor, you said it was at a Lutheran church, and I've heard you talk about it before, where you've said it's a bit of a more liberal church as far as churches go, where they were more accepting of, you know, the LGBT community, and I imagine having female pastors and stuff is cool, which. It's wild that the bar is that low, but
that's true.
And I had a similar thing. My uncle actually is a pastor. I was gonna say he still is. He is a pastor, and he was a pastor for a Lutheran church. Funny enough, and they were always more progressive like that, where they were always cool with that stuff. And I had a very similar experience where, like, I actually started working at the church. I was the sound guy there. And then you start to see some of the politics of it, and you're like, this is weird, man. And it wasn't until I started to really start to, like, look at it from a wider perspective instead of, like, my own, you know, singular perspective, where I'm like, well, this is just how this church is, where it's, like, not even that bad, but, like, it seems a little funny. And then we're a progressive church, so what are those other churches like, you know? I don't know if you can relate to that at all, but I guess what was that experience like, realizing that, or was it not even that, it was just like, I don't want to be a youth pastor anymore, and it wasn't until after you were a youth pastor that you kind of started to deconstruct? Or
like I said, it was a slow process. There was some of the deconstruction happening while I was a youth pastor, but most of it was after. Because after I left the Lutheran church, I took a break from going to church at all. And then I started going to a church that my friends were going to. But I quickly realized that there's a difference between liberal and hip. You know, like there's those hipster churches that are still just that conservative church but with a different facade. And then I was like, oh yeah, no, they're just still as hateful as everybody else. And then I started going to this church that was supposed to be like the most liberal church in Calgary. And it's where I lived at the time. And I started going there, and I realized that, they're pretty progressive in a lot of ways. But I just like, it seemed meaningless at that point. I'm like, I'm stretching it out so far that it's like, why am I even going to church if this is what church is? Because it was like, I don't know. And also nobody was friendly there, despite the name of their church, which I won't say, but
okay. It was called Friendly.
Something like that. Yeah. And it was like one of those things where I was like, yeah, nobody's talking to me. Yeah, sure, they have Starbucks coffee in the lobby and stuff, but it's like, why am I going to church? And also I was just like, I can believe and figure out what I believe without going to one of these buildings. And and then eventually I was like, I don't believe it. So
yeah. Dude, that is such a great observation. The just because it's hip doesn't mean it's progressive. Yeah. I live in Phoenix, which is a pretty right-leaning state, and all the big like mega churches, are like, yeah, come in. We got like concerts going on every day. We're super accepting. I had a friend go to one of these churches. I won't say the name either, I guess. But if you live in Phoenix, you know exactly what church I'm talking about. You see all the bumper stickers on all the cars. She's a gay woman, and she went up to a person who worked at the church, and she's like, hey, are you guys I'm looking for a church. Are you guys accepting of gay people? And they just sort of looked at her, and they're like kind of taken aback, like not knowing what to say. And they're like, you can come here, like sort of like yeah, I guess. And it's not until you get into the nitty gritty that you realize, oh, these places aren't as accepting as they kind of let off. It's
you can attend, but you can't hold hands with your partner while you're in church, and you can't have any volunteer positions, and definitely can't have any staff positions.
Yeah, it's wild. And these are the like quote unquote like progressive churches that are like, oh, we're super excited, like Hillsong, you know, that are like the more mainstream ones, and they, you know, all that stuff came out about them recently and stuff. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. Is Driscoll's not near you, right? That's in Arizona. Mark Driscoll, the Mars. He used to be Mars Hill, and now it's like something else church. But that was he was in Seattle, and then he moved down to Arizona after.
Oh, is that
like,
the
his tail between his legs?
Is that the Dream City thing?
Maybe.
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple mega churches here that are like, when you were growing up, to get back to that a little bit, like, what was your experience like with like secular media?
Like I was into The Simpsons and things like that, like TV shows that I had to convince my parents I was allowed to watch. As far as music and stuff, I mostly listened to Christian music because that's what I had access to. But I did have an hour cassette tape that I taped off the radio of popular songs at the time, just so I kind of knew, so I could kind of relate with people my age. And so I just like walk around with, you know, like Bon Jovi and Elton John, and so it was like, and then, but most like the music I listened to would be like DC Talk and Newsboys, things like that. And then, as far as like, like I was pretty up on pop culture stuff, but it really depended. So
with Jesus Freak, classic jam. I mean, I guess did you feel like when you were doing that, were you like having to do that behind your family and your church's back, or were they like whatever, you know?
It was the church. I don't think the church that I went to cared as much about that. But yeah, a little bit for my family, because I had seen my dad get really upset at my sister. My sister's a lot older than me. So when she was a teenager, I saw my dad get really upset if there was like any controversial lyrics in her music. Even my favorite, and this is all of my siblings' favorites, is we built the city on rock and roll. He said was evil because you should have your life built on a foundation of Jesus Christ, not on rock and roll. so that was a good one.
Hey, what's more rock and roll than Jesus? You know?
Yeah, exactly.
He's got the long hair. Come on.
And we always joked about every time there would be like an ugly, like evil villain in a movie. My dad would be like, he looks like the devil himself. Shut it off. It's like, how does Darth Vader look like the devil?
Also, isn't that like a good lesson then?
Yeah, exactly.
That's weird. Yeah. So my dad was like that too, where it was like, he'd be like super cool with the most random, like things that you'd be like, how are you cool with this? And then like I put on Halloween Town once, you know, like the Disney Channel movie. And he's like, oh, this is witches. This is witchcraft. No hate to my dad. I love you, Dad. He's not like that anymore. But
yes, like my dad, we joked out how it went from he looks like the devil himself to eventually it was just like, oh, he's cute. And then that was it wasn't shut it off. It was just, oh, he's cute. And then that was the end of that thought. So it definitely changed.
I can't help but think like Christian parents are just like, they're not sure, like they don't know, you know, they're like, where do I draw the line? Because they like that stuff too, you know, deep down everyone likes Star Wars, even if their religion tells them not to, you know. The reason I really bring it up though is because like in your videos, in your video essays, you have a great selection of like pop culture references and clips, and that's why I was like, was it pop culture that maybe kind of pulled you away from but it seems like
I'd say like that's part of it. I mean, it wasn't the main thing. I think I would have I was a pop culture nerd, yeah, from a young age. And then especially after when I was out on my own, it was my life. My dad used to always say, "Oh, there's Trevor in TV land again," because I just start quoting like a movie or whatever. And I would always find something that relayed back to a movie or TV show like in a conversation. So that was just always kind of how I was. And so I don't know. I think, yeah, no, if I was still a believer, I would still be doing that. Not sure how much it tied into my deconstruction, but there's probably elements of it. Yeah. I mean, I would watch movies that were critical of religion. So I'm sure some of their ideas seeped in there as well. So there's
Yeah.
kind of no boundary like of types of movies and stuff I wouldn't watch. So yeah.
Um, so when you went to like school for being a youth pastor,
Yeah.
what kind of school is it? Is it like a Christian college, or like what is
Yeah,
it?
it's a Christian college. It was a small Christian college.
Is it actually
in
like
Calgary.
accredited, or is it more of like a certificate? I guess I don't know.
It's technically accredited, and I use that word technically because it's like there's a couple bodies of accreditation within North America that there's a few different ones based on Christian colleges. So it's basically these Christian colleges agree that we can transfer courses, we're accredited or whatever, but you have to transfer within those colleges. And there's also something that they had that you could still transfer in credits from other schools. So like if you went to a real university, they would accept that as a credit. So there was kind of a thing. And I technically do have like a bachelor's degree. It's not like a certificate of Bibles. Like it's it's nice that they named it Bachelor of Arts in Leadership Development. They changed it kind of near the end. It would have been a Bachelor of Arts in religious studies with a major in youth ministry. That was my original. And then they're like, "Hey, we're trying these new things. You want to see if your credits transfer over?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I'm glad now that that's my that's my degree instead of Bachelor of Arts in Religious Studies. But yeah, because like you learn things like there was a couple English classes and things like that, and there was a couple like psych classes, things that look at the real world. But then there would be things like how to run a youth group and how to budget a youth group. And
yeah, and I imagine you had to like take your electives and stuff. Yeah. So when you were in that school, was like, what were your classmates like? Was it a bunch of like-minded people, or was it a bunch of different theologies, I guess, and like different thought processes, or was everyone? What was that like?
There was definitely different thought process for sure. It was a multi-denominational school, so we definitely would have arguments in class about just certain things. Like the biggest one that I can remember was the question, could Jesus have sinned if he wanted to? So like, did he like not sin because he wasn't capable of it, or did he not sin because he was able to but refused to sin? And that one, well, I don't know why, but we got like our class was just like on fire, arguing back and forth. It's funny looking back too how passionate you can get about something that to me is just like a meaningless question now. But yeah, and but for the most part, like especially the youth group, like the youth majors were an interesting group. We were either like the super nerdy people or the super douchey group. So it's either like, we love movies and video games, or I don't know, I want to be a hero worshipped youth pastor at a mega church kind of people. So, and some of them are doing that now. So good for them, I guess.
So like, are you still friends with some of those classmates, or?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I am. I'm friends with a handful of people from Bible college. Friends with two of my roommates, actually still pretty good friends with two of my roommates from first year. Like really close with one of them. And then, the other guy, ooh, what a douche. He's the one who ratted me out for playing. He got upset that I was playing Champagne Supernova. because it says because it mentions getting high.
I mean, what is drinking? Whatever.
Yeah.
uh, so like of the class, I imagine you are at least friends with a bunch of those people as on Facebook,
Yeah.
or whatever social media you have.
Yeah.
And like when you look at their pages, are they all still pretty active in the religious thing, or have some of them not gone? I'm always curious about this. Like,
Some of them, I don't think you'll find many youth majors who are youth pastors.
yeah,
Like it's one of those things where either you move on to some other sort of ministry or you just drop it altogether. But I know, like, my one friend from the time he went to summer camp till now, his goal was always to work at summer camp. And now that's what he does. He's a camp leader. Like, he runs a camp, and that's his like ministry and stuff. And he's still very much in that world. And then there's a couple people who I'm no longer friends with, but I like to Google them and watch their sermons. I have a rule where I never use a sermon on my videos from somebody I know, but yeah, those are pretty great.
yeah, that's wild. Did it feel like oh man, I can't imagine like going to a Christian school, because it's so out of my field of vision. Like, I've never, I grew up Christian, but it was always sort of like we were kind of at a distance. So like that sort of involvement in the church now, especially looking back at it, like I just can't imagine it. Did it feel like you were walking on eggshells? Like a lot of, I mean, you were getting in trouble for playing Champagne Supernova.
Yeah.
Like, did it feel like eggshells, or were you like, nah, like this is my life, like it's whatever?
Yeah. Near the end, it was definitely not eggshells. Like, yeah, there was a few people who were stupid. And like, there was a burrito place called Jackass Burritos or something like that. And I remember I brought a burrito in once, and somebody was upset that I supported a company that had the word ass in their name. Like, we read a book with the word ass in it. Like,
yeah,
what are you talking about?
Pretty foul language in the Bible, actually.
And so there's a few people like that. But near the end, I was just there to get my degree. So I would just like sit on the couch near the front of like by the doors. Like, whoever wants to say hi can, but I'm just doing my work. And it was like, I don't know. I just didn't care after a while. Like, we had to go to chapel twice a week, and I just refused to go. And because I think it was Tuesday and Thursday was chapel. I had classes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and they still expected me to go. I'm like, no, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm going to have a job. So
yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. Eventually I got exempt from that. So, but yeah, I don't know. Like, some people, I would be afraid to say certain things, and then eventually I'm like, no, I'm just going to be me. Like, I remember even like worse than the Champagne Supernova was once I was walking along and somebody said something, and I just looked at them. I was like, holy shit. And they're like, whoa. And then it was like, we talked about it later, like in dorms with all the guys, and someone's like, well, I don't like saying the S word, but if you could just maybe, if you do say it, don't say holy before it, because that signifies our Lord. And it's like,
wow. After you finished school, what was the process like trying to find a job?
Hell. It was hell.
Because were you like, I need to find in this denomination or a church of these values, or were you a bit more broad, or like what was that like?
I was a bit more broad. I applied to a bunch of churches. It took me a year or year and a half ish to get a job. I did a lot of interviews, and they would involve meeting with the search committee, and then you'd meet with the board, and then you'd meet with the pastors. So it was pretty a long process for each church, and they would ask you very intrusive questions and very awkward questions. At one church, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be, oh yeah. They're like, and you'll also be running the college and career group. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. And they're like, there's a lot of single girls in there. I'm like, don't worry. I'm not going to, try to hit on on the girls at your church, and they're like, no, we want you to, just don't hit on the ones in the youth group. I'm like, you're giving me an authority position.
Yeah, what the heck?
Asking me to date the women, and like, I'm not. Like,
oh my God.
Yeah. So it was weird. And then, when I eventually got the job, I applied as a full-time job, and they ended up moving it down to 8 hours a week. So I'm still doing everything a full-time youth pastor does, but I'm being paid for 8 hours a week. So yeah, that was ridiculous.
Man. I was a sound guy at a church. It was the same sort of experience where it's like, you'd have to come in, get everything set up, all this blah, blah, blah. But like, we're only really paying you for the services. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess which is ultimately why I quit doing sound at a church. Cause I was like, I mean, I have to have another job to like support myself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Cause I was working full time. I was, working at a record store. I think by that time I was a manager at a record store. So I was,
that's a way cooler job.
It was a way funner, way more fun job too. So, and then I did that a little bit after I was a youth pastor too. So, and then those don't really exist anymore. So
yeah, they're still around here and there.
Yeah.
Actually, records are coming back, man, in a big way.
That's true. Yeah.
In a big way.
True.
So that's interesting. Actually, you worked at a record store, and you said like in your early age, you listened to mainly Christian music. Obviously, you were listening to Champagne Supernova at one point. So like at what point did that kind of flip where you're like, okay, actually, I think I want to listen to secular music more?
That was probably, in grade 12. And then in my first year of college, my roommate had way better taste in music than I did. And I got into a lot of stuff he was into. Oh,
interesting.
And then in my second year of college, I moved in with a bunch of guys who were just like, music nerds, and they gave me my music education. So, and then eventually one of them gave me a job at the record store. So
did you ever, this is totally just a tangential question, but like, did you ever play music or anything? Like,
no, like
any
like
instrument?
No.
Yeah.
And that was always the question in my youth pastor interviews too, is like, do you play guitar? No, tone deaf. But
yeah, it is kind of like, it's weird. Almost like Christian leadership positions all kind of include a level of musicality in a weird way. Like the pastor's always up there singing or doing something. Yeah. It's kind of strange.
My uncle's a pastor. He's retired now, but he would have to lead music, and he's like, it's part of my job. I'm tone deaf, but sometimes I have to.
Yeah, my uncle's the same way, where he's not tone deaf. He's actually a pretty good singer, but like he's very shy about singing and hates singing, but like he'll lead in singing sometimes. So just like it's part of it.
Yeah.
Man, I have a pretty pessimistic look at music in churches. I almost feel like they use it as like I'm trying to think of the right word, just as a way to like get people in. It's like hey,
the word primer comes to mind with me, where it's like, it's just gearing you up to like get in this state of mind.
Yeah. I feel like they use music as a manipulation tool.
Yeah.
They also use like the music, part of like, like worship and stuff as a way to get people more involved in the church, which when you're at a church, you're like, oh, that's great. You're getting people involved in the church. But as a person who doesn't go to church, I'm like, man, you're just like manipulating people into going to church. I don't really know what I'm going with that, but it's just something thinking out loud, I guess. Music in churches is always weird. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, like Hillsong is like a perfect example. Like they use their music as like a gateway drug into Christianity, and it's so wild. While we're on the topic of Hillsong and like some of the recent stuff coming out about them. What has that been like? This is totally a weird segue, but I'm going with it.
Do it.
The recent years, with COVID and Trump and all the allegations coming out against like Hillsong and different churches, the internet being more readily available to people, so they kind of are more aware of some of the previous allegations, like with the Catholic Church and stuff like that. Allegations against the Mormon Church. What has like that been like as a content creator? And like, do you notice that as like, someone who's in this space and like sees it? I've noticed within my own family, I'm trying to think of how to frame this. Like within my own family, right? I have a couple, I won't say who they are in my family, but I have family members that that I never thought in a million years would ever start to step away from the church, that are now starting to step away from the church just because of all the stuff that's happened over the course of the past couple of years. So I guess I'm wondering your thoughts on all that stuff.
Yeah, it's so strange because like I did a podcast episode about Hillsong 3 years ago, and it's so much has happened since then. Like I should probably do a follow-up, but everybody's talking about Hillsong now. But they've always been on my radar as this is a sketchy place. Like this, there's not good things going on there. And then that's just been confirmed over and over again. And I think you'll see that it's happening in most big churches and most church organizations, that there's just rampant abuse. And yeah, as more people are seeing it and more people are speaking out against it, I think, we're going to see a lot more people walk away, and maybe not walk away from their faith, maybe not walk away from their religion, but they're going to be walking away from those big churches or their local church and be like, I can just believe my own, because they've just been let down so many times. And I think as we see, like, the more people are being exposed, the more people are going to walk away. So I think it's just going to keep happening. And I've seen it with family members that I would not expect to see it from. And they're like, I can't do it anymore. So it's a weird place we're in.
Yeah, it's so strange. I wonder what like the state of the, like, we've always been considered a well, I guess you're Canadian. So yeah. I guess I can't speak for Canada, but America, United States has always been considered like a Christian nation, and I'm wondering, like, is that going to be the case for much longer? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's tough because the other side is just doubling down. Like, so many people, like, you got your Marjorie Taylor Greens and your Lauren Boeberts, who are like, nope, this is a Christian nation, and we don't want separation of church and state. But then you have more and more people saying they don't go to church or they don't know what they believe. And they're just, so as the number of Christians go down, the number of vocal Christians seem to be going up. So it's hard to say, like, because now they feel like they're in a fight, that the reason people are walking away is because we walked away from our Christian values, and now we're going to fight harder. And we're seeing some of that in Canada too. Like I lived in Alberta for 10 years, and that's our Bible Belt in a lot of ways. And you're seeing a lot of stuff coming out of there, and you're seeing a lot of just like, kind of extremist people here too, who are just like more vocal than they need to be, because they're afraid that, we're losing our grasp on the world, and Christianity is losing the fight. So they got to fight harder. I don't know. It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's kind of like this weird double-edged sword on both ends, where like, as they start to get more extreme, more people kind of start to leave, like so many people in my family that I would have never expected, and other people that in my family that have kind of walked away but haven't admitted it. But then on the other end, it's like, as people start to walk away, they start to get more hardcore, and then their, group becomes more hardcore. It's this really weird kind of state of the world, because that doesn't just go for it's like religion and politics. It's like both things kind of work in tandem. It's really strange.
I always think of I forget whenever somebody asks me what churches I went to growing up, I always forget about this one, because you asked me earlier, I didn't even bring it up. But when my family first moved to Alberta, which they only lasted a year, I stayed longer. But when we first moved to Alberta, we started going to this small little cult. It was like like charismatic cult. And when we realized like, oh, this is not good, the youth leaders kind of separated out me and my siblings to be like, just because your family's leaving doesn't mean you have to leave. And they were really trying to get us to like go against our family. And that at one point, the head pastor said that the reason, because my dad had like severe osteo and rheumatoid arthritis, like throughout his whole body, like he was always in so much pain. So he would always go up there and ask for healing. And that was kind of why he was interested in these kind of churches. And then that pastor was like, well, now I'm seeing that you're just addicted to your arthritis and you like the attention that it gives you. And so that's why God's never going to heal you from it. Me and my brothers are like, we're out of here. Bye. Like,
that is so absurd. Wow.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Where that came from, but I just thought of that story.
that is so wild. Yeah. Actually, it brings up bringing up cults and stuff. First of all, like, yeah, man, those places are they're just a breeding ground of taking advantage of the less fortunate, and like, hey, person with horrible, lung disorder, or hey, person with, a crazy skin condition and can't afford their healthcare. You should tithe to us so we can heal you. It's so absurd. So, with cults and stuff, you obviously, you talk about Christianity on your channel, but you also talk about cults. Have you always found like an interest in cults, or does your interest in Christianity almost like lead you down the cult route? Like,
both. Yeah. I find cults fascinating, and I just, one of the things I really like about like studying cults is just how much it relates to just the average religious experience. And it's just like on a smaller scale with more defined, like, oh yeah, like they knew what they were doing. They're purposely manipulating or whatever, or not always purposely, but just like they're manipulating in this strong way. And it's very similar to mainstream religion. It's just more subtle there, and it's really interesting to see the parallels and things like that. So
I'm curious, when you were in school, did you guys talk about cults? Is that something that you learned about? And like, did you learn about other religions as well? Like,
not a lot of Bible colleges do, though. Ours was, a tiny bit more progressive. So you learn about other religions and how they work and stuff. And then you'd also learn about parallels between Christianity and other religions, and things that seem to have been borrowed from other religions. And we'd talk it out, and like, it was more in an apologetics way, but at least they taught it. Like, you learn how Jesus, his temptation from Satan is very similar to like a Buddhist story. And it's like, did they steal? Was it parallel thinking? Is it? Yeah. So, and the Buddhist story came out way before.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Cause I always wonder, like, that's always been a point of breakdown when it comes to, when I was more religious. I was never like super, super religious, but like, when I was a bit more religious, that was always a point of breakdown for me, where I'm like, but what about other religions, know? And like, I always wonder, like, if you're in school to be a pastor and you're learning about these other religions and cults and how similar cults are to just a regular church, I don't know how you can learn about that stuff and continue. I don't know. It's just,
I think a lot of the classes, they had to put in an apologetics statement with like each thing of like why it doesn't disprove Christianity, because some of it really seemed to.
Right.
Yeah.
So you were a youth pastor. You decided not youth pastor. What did you end up doing after you were a youth pastor?
So as a job, I worked at an office, and then I got a job at a GPS tracking company, which was, fine. I liked the people I worked with. It was a nice job. And then I also worked with a film company. And so it was just like a couple friends basically who wanted to make movies. So we tried making movies and didn't succeed. They're doing well now, but at the time we didn't succeed. Yeah. And then when I moved to Toronto, it was with the goal of I wanted to write for TV. So that was like kind of where I was, and I wanted to write in general. So I started writing plays, and I started doing little like shorts on YouTube, and I was in the Fringe Festival, like a theater festival, a couple times and things like that. So I got more into writing and not church stuff, and just like writing things I enjoyed and writing comedy and stuff like that. So yeah. And then just meanwhile having coffee shop jobs and things like that.
So at what point did that sort of turn into what you're doing now? Like,
yeah, that was because I was in the middle of writing a play. So I was supposed to be in the 2020 Toronto Fringe Festival. I was actually writing a play about a faith healer, and then the festival was canceled because of COVID. So and then eventually I was laid off because of COVID, and I was like just thinking of things that I can do with my time where I can't film shorts with friends because everybody's isolated. So doing video essays was just something that made sense because I could find all the footage myself. I could write it myself and record it myself and just do everything alone. And then I was also noticing things that were really bothering me about Christianity and evangelicalism. And I had been doing this religious podcast for a couple of years. So I was like, well, I'll combine those two ideas and make a video essay or two. And then that was kind of like how that got started. So, and then never did finish writing the faith healer play, but
hey, it's never too late, man. It's never too late.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So like, what was that? At what point did you start the like religious podcast? And like, when you started the religious podcast, was that were you kind of combative with the religious stuff at that time, or did it start with you still kind of being religious, or yeah?
Yeah, I wasn't religious at all. Like I walked away from my faith 10 years ago.
Okay.
And then I started the podcast 4 years ago. And with the podcast, it was just a matter of, I was doing a comedy podcast with my friend, and it was a lot of fun to do, but it was one of those things where we just weren't getting any listens. And I was like, well, you probably just need a topic, right? So I was like, okay, I'll figure out a topic. And then I was hanging out with my friend. She grew up in a very similar circumstance to me. And the idea was, I pitched her an idea of doing a podcast about religion together and growing up religious. And then she ended up not wanting to do it because she was afraid of what her family would think and things like that. They're still kind of known Christian like music artists. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So I asked my buddy Damien if he wanted to do it. And at first, yeah, we weren't going to be combative at all. It was just going to be, we'd talk about like my experience, but also just religious things. So we talk about religious movements and events and things like that. And then you can't help, I think, when it comes to religion, just putting your own opinion in. So eventually our opinion kind of came in more and more and more. And then that was that.
Do you think doing this content has made you feel more sour towards some of that stuff than you probably would had you not made the content? Or are you not sour about it? Or
I'm not as sour as people think.
Yeah.
I'm not walking around in a slump all the time thinking about how much I hate religion.
You've never struck me as someone that's like super sour about it, you know? So
yeah, but I think it's been therapeutic. Like, I think working through this stuff and like having an outlet to work through this stuff has actually been helpful more than anything. And hopefully it's helping other people. Because I think a lot of people have been damaged by churches and by religion. So yeah, I don't know. I'm sour in some ways and I'm angry in some ways. And especially when I'm doing the research, I get angry. But yeah.
Oh yeah. Especially when you're talking about stuff, like the Catholic Church or, the Hillsong allegations. It's hard not to be.
Yeah.
But I think that's like what's so good about your content, versus, I'm trying to think of a good example of someone, Bill Maher, right? He did that documentary years ago. What was it? Religious or whatever?
Religious.
I think the thing about Religious, which when I was younger, I was like, that's it. That's so edgy, bro. I love it. But I think what's different about that and your content is you come at it from a bit more, like a place of sympathy almost, because you were there, you lived it. Bill Maher never lived it, and I think with Bill Maher's stuff, and I'm just using Bill Maher as an example, there's tons of people like that who make content like that, and no shame to any of those people. It's just like you're not changing anyone's mind when you're Bill Maher and you're just sort of screaming at a fake Jesus or whatever. But with you might not be changing anyone's mind either, but I feel like you're more likely to at least reach someone who's like, oh yeah, I get it. Or at least help someone who's in the process of, getting away from a church or a bad experience with a church and be like, oh, so finally someone who like understands, Yeah,
I think because my goal has never been to disprove anything. It's always been to let people know they're okay. And let people know that if you're doubting this, if you're struggling with this, you're not the only one and you're okay. So, and then I think that's kind of the approach I've always tried to take. There's definitely times where I don't take that approach, but that's kind of like the overall like idea is that, you're not alone in this. Like we were struggling with this too, or we have struggled with this too. And there's other people out there. So,
that being said though, have you received a lot of backlash from your content?
Oh, there's people who hate me. And
I'd imagine
one guy just kept commenting about how like I put out a video and he'd be like, this doesn't disprove God. Like that's not what I'm doing. Like, and then he'd always be like, the Catholic Church is the true church anyway, so it doesn't matter that you're disproving these other. It's like, okay, cool. Like, and then to that plus like angry, like I don't know if it's gone as far as death threats, but pretty close of like, especially the burn in hell threats, the threats of like eternal damnation. But it's isn't that wild? It's like on YouTube. You can't like, obviously I won't even say it because I'm going to post this on YouTube, but you can't make those kind of threats. But like, but for some reason, if you're religious, you're able to say burn in hell, which is basically the same thing as a death threat, Exactly.
It's pretty, that's pretty wild. I've wondered about that because that's got to be tough on the mental health actually, like because you're trying to do a good thing and then it's so ironic that like it's probably a lot of Christians I'd imagine who have the problem with it and they're the religion of love and that's just so wild.
I feel like there's times too where there must be like a Facebook group out there, like some, Christian mom's Facebook group or Christian, like whatever. And then somebody will be like, look at this load of crap and post one of my videos. Cause then all of a sudden I'll get like a bunch of angry like comments on the same video that I put out a year ago. And it's like, I wonder how that happened. And that's kind of my thought is like, somebody's like, let's all go over here and disprove this guy's premise or whatever. And
so with the religious content, do you ever plan on like maybe making another channel that's not so religious, like going back to the sort of comedy podcast thing, or obviously you're a film buff, maybe doing like a film podcast or something, or
I'd love to do someday. It's a dream of mine to do a time travel podcast, like just about movies about time travel and TV shows about time travel. That's because it's like, that's the thing I nerd out about the most in pop culture is time travel. And so that's something that, I would love to do it. I don't know how I could sell it though, because it's so off brand from what I'm doing now. But and I even thought of it doing like that as like a patron only kind of extra or something like that, or just a side thing. My brother's kind of similar, so I've talked to him about doing it with him, and be a good way to just like have a weekly hangout with my brother too. So so who knows. And I used to do this YouTube show called Tonightman with Trevor Tonightman, which I never talk about on my current channel, but where I'd interview local Toronto comedians and actors. And it was kind of like a Between Two Ferns kind of
nice
interview kind of thing. And I've been talking to my friend who I did that with about just doing it again for fun, and just like, because it's a fun way to hang out with other comedians. And
that's awesome. Well, I hope to see it one day. Well, I have to ask, now that we're nearing the end of the show, I have to ask, because one of my main shows on this channel is we do a video game podcast.
Okay.
Have you ever been a gamer? Have you dabbled?
Not really.
Not really.
I always blame it on having 4 siblings. They were better at it. I have anxiety, so if I played, I would get criticized for how I played, so I just stopped. So I do play Mario Kart. I have a Switch, and that's pretty much all I play. And now I'll play like the old games, like the old N64 games and stuff that I couldn't play when I was a kid.
Nice.
So now I have all those because of the Switch like membership thing. So I'll play them. And like Super Nintendo games, NES. But I was never a huge gamer. So
definitely hop into Splatoon when it comes out, because that's the perfect online game for a non-gamer. So just throwing that out there. I have to ask.
I've been very. Oh, sorry.
No.
Intrigued by Stray because I'm a cat guy. So
yeah, dude, Stray rules. I just beat it recently. It's awesome. Yeah. It's great. You're just a cat. It's great.
Yeah.
And actually, the story is quite compelling as well. You get kind of sucked into it. I had to ask, especially since you make a religious podcast, and that's been a point of contention with some religious people is gaming and stuff. So I had to ask.
Yeah, and we did that one episode about that Christian Nintendo company. What were they called? But they made Christian Nintendo games in the 90s. So we did an episode about them. So
that's awesome. Well, Zoom is yelling at me that we have 10 minutes. So I figure we wrap it up. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm usually hanging out at the grocery store. I'm at Believe It or Not on YouTube. Instagram is Believe It or Not podcast, and then Twitter and Facebook are also Believe It or Not. And you can hit me up on Twitter too at just Trevor Poelman. I'm usually tweeting dumb stuff there. So
nice.
But the main one, go to that YouTube channel.
I will leave a link down in the old description, so people definitely go check that out. I could talk about this stuff all day, but I don't want to keep you all day. But I greatly appreciate you coming on the show.
For sure.
Everyone, go watch his content. And in the comments of every one of his videos, if you're watching this video right now, go into those comments and tell him to make that time travel podcast, because we all want to see it.